the Thursday military analysis show. So with us always Glenn Grant, and Yuri's joining us as well. So really wanted to start talking about the Western NATO and other Western countries starting to ramp up support to Ukraine, which we're seeing a lot more of really in the past 48, 72 hours. So I'll throw it over to Glenn and get us started.
Yo, well, let's have a look at this. The complete northern area now. The Ukrainians have re-established the border, so the border with Belarus and actually the northern border with Russia is now back to the way it was before, with border guards and everything else. And it looks pretty solid. That almost all the troops that were in Belarus have now moved round to the northeast, either towards facing Kharkiv or further down, facing the troops in Donbass. So working our way round from the top. Sumy is being bombarded. Kharkiv is being bombarded, and there are a large amount of troops, Russian troops, sitting outside of Kharkiv, supposedly waiting to come in. I heard that there were 25 battle groups, which is really a lot. But Kharkiv is actually quite strongly held by territorial troops, although they haven't got that much artillery in support. So one hopes that the Russians don't go for heavy bombardment as they've been doing everywhere else. Moving further south, but below Kharkiv, the troops have moved from Kharkiv down to Izium, which is sort of 50-70 kilometer trip down, and they're trying to cut off the troops that are at the top part of the Donbass line, the old trench lines. So there's actually work from the south of that, a part of that, and from the north of that. What's worrying is that there is a very steady movement forward of the Russian troops. They've changed their tactics completely. They're now going back to the old ways of fighting. So instead of having 3 battalion groups, they're pulling them together into brigades and divisions and putting them close together. So they're forming a much stronger phalanx of enemy to fight. But the infantry are waiting until the ground has been heavily prepared by artillery, which is what they were not doing previously. So this is back to the old days. Now in that northeast area, now we have the chief of defense, Gerasimov, who is probably being punished by being sent to Izium to make sure that the breakthrough occurs. So this is going to be interesting times to see whether his presence actually makes things better or worse around Izium. But it is worrying, and what is particularly worrying is that the troops are running, Ukrainian troops are running low on artillery ammunition, and in some cases even other ammunition natures. But the NATO equipment is not going to arrive yet. So there's a holding on period, and it may well be that they get pushed back. It could even be that there is a breakthrough there. Although knowing the stubbornness of the Ukrainian troops, they're going to stand and fight to the last Ukrainian and the last bullet. Going down further, the old trench lines are holding. There are 1 or 2 minor breakthroughs on them, but pretty much there's a couple of 100 kilometers there of defense that is holding quite strongly. So, but it's being really heavily attacked again by artillery first, and especially by rocket launchers in these areas. So there's a lot of multi-barrel rocket launcher fire, which of course does get down into the trenches because it's because of the way that it actually is. So there we have that. Now below that, Mariupol is in, I can only describe it as in shit state. It's dire. The boys are hanging on, and they're hanging on inside the old ironworks as best as they can. It's a huge area. It's like 4 square miles of ironworks. It's not a small place, and it's riddled with tunnels underneath. But the Russians are just dropping the biggest bombs they can on top of it. So today they dropped a serious bomb on one area, which collapsed the roof and collapsed right down and has caused casualties. It's not sure how many, but it is apparently quite a lot of new deaths and to use the expression they use, re-injured people. So people who were injured before are now injured even more. Now this is, I mean, if you talk about war crimes, this is probably the worst that you can think of, because it's basically just bombing innocent civilians in most of this, and you can't actually get any nastier than that as a race of human beings. Well, they're not human beings, as a race of animals who are just bombing human beings for the sheer joy of killing. This is like a bear or a fox just killing something for the sake of it. Moving further down the coast, they're holding everything along the south coast, north of Crimea. But what they're doing here is, it's not so much that they're pushing forward, which they are, but slowly. It's what they're doing behind. They're terrorizing the population. They're terrorizing them by taking prisoners, by kidnapping children and sending women to the front line to spy for them, by torturing people, and of course by the normal things of rape and murder. So the aim there is to bring this whole area from Nikolaev across under Russian control, to make it not part of the old Donbass area, but even a separate enclave in itself. And people are fighting back a little bit, but it's really, really difficult, because this area was not armed before. There was no territorial defense organized before the Russians actually came in. And despite the fact that there are people who actually want to go down there and do sort of territorial defense and partisan work, the army doesn't seem to be showing much enthusiasm for that. But we know that people can get through, because someone has just walked with their dog all the way from Mariupol out. So it is possible to go through all the villages down there and actually get in and out of places. Nikolaev is under daily pressure, but it's basically it's the stopping block point for Odessa. So they've got to get past Nikolaev to get down to Odessa, and Nikolaev is holding quite strongly at the moment. North of Nikolaev, the Ukrainians have been trying to push back to Kherson, but the progress has been extremely slow, almost glacial. But they are saying all the time that they are moving forward. So Kherson is still, 20 kilometers away from the front line. So it's within sort of shelling range for Ukraine. But obviously Ukraine does not want to shell anything in Kherson, because it's full of people. So that actually sort of handcuffs the Ukrainians, because they're fighting now with one hand behind their back. Going past Odessa, we have the Moldova and Transnistria, and Transnistria is now on war alert, which means that Moldova is now on war alert. The Transnistrian army, depending upon who you talk to, ranges anything from 8,000 to 2,000, but they've not been fighting anywhere ever. So this is hardly going to be the Brigade of Guards come pouring out of Transnistria, if indeed they are forced to fight by Russia. My suspicion is that a lot of Transnistrians are not going to want to fight at all, the ones in the army, because they're untrained and they know that they're going to get killed. The one from Odessa towards Romania, there is also an estuary, and there's a bridge over the estuary, and that bridge has been shelled a couple of times and damaged, which gave rise to the thought that the piece of Ukraine on the other side of the estuary that Russia might try to capture that. They could do that by bringing in troops close on the Black Sea to Romania and putting them into that area, or even perhaps coming out from Transnistria into that area. But to do that, that means that the bridge has got to be destroyed, and it hasn't been yet. Otherwise, the troops from Odessa will just go across the bridge and fight on the other side. And as we speak, the Romanians are actually driving some of their troops down now to the border, just in case this happens, and in case that the war actually starts in Moldova. Because my suspicion is that if Transnistrians decide they're going to go into Moldova as opposed to going into Ukraine, that Romania will actually step in and do something. And that, of course, might be what Putin wants, to engage a NATO country. We shall see. Anyway, that is my round robin. The last bit I would just say is that the center of the country is not immune to air attacks or to rocket attacks, not from air attacks, to rocket attacks, and that there have been 5 attacks on railway lines, which could become more serious if they keep doing this, because a lot of the supply relies upon rail traffic. I think that's me.
Yuri, we haven't had you on for a while, and just wanted to get your impressions of being on the ground in Kyiv. First of all, how's the capital region in terms of cleaning up from the aftermath of the occupation, but also, although I would imagine regular army troops have left Kyiv mainly to go to the fight in the east, what's the activities of the territorial defense in Kyiv? What are you up to there and preparing for in terms of Kyiv's military situation?
So today I visited the center of Kyiv, and I still experienced 4 checkpoints for the main road, the Prospect Перемоги, to the center. And I think that for last 2 weeks, especially after Orthodox Easter, about 10% of population of inhabitants of Kyiv arrived, and we see again traffic jams in Kyiv, and I see that everyone wants to come back to regular life. But still, checkpoints are active, and it means that there is some tension inside people's minds, and also territory defense. Even Kyiv territory defense is still on roads. Also, I visited Western Ukraine, and especially Zhytomyr. About every 50 kilometers, I see checkpoints, and territory defense is active there. But also, what I see that territory defense is still mobilizing additional troops to regions where frontline now exist. So territory defense is grouping additional troops and send them to frontline. At the same time, all existing brigades are moving to frontline too, and northern border is defended more and more by territory defense. And also, last weeks I had talk with my friends from Belarus, and they're describing me the situation that Belarusian army is not ready to entry. So the risk and the probability of entrance from Belarusian army is very low. So northern part of borderline, especially Belarus borderline, is defended by more and more by territory defense. About Transnistria, as far as you know, there were some explosions in military bases, in Russian military bases, but according to intelligence information, there situated only two tactical battalion groups, so it's about 1,500 to 2,000 troops, and mostly this is engineering troops, and they were not active, they were not training for last 20 years. So the probability of active movements there is estimated as low, but anyway, there have very big stocks of weapon and ammunition there, and I think it is last days explosions are connected with them. Also, I send you some documents which were sent by intelligence. They gathering population, and it's like some kind of mobilizing of civilians for trainings and for grouping into some troops. So it's maybe it sounds like preliminary announcing of mobilization. Inside Bilohorodka, inside our territory defense, we are still working, we are still waiting, we are still training and keeping strong. At the same time, part of our troops are enriching army and enriching and leaving for frontline.
So your territorial defense is also sending soldiers to the front lines.
Yes, yes.
And are they joining regular army units or other territorial defense, or are they all mixed up?
They are joining regular army.
Okay. All right. So Dave and Glenn, I wanted to bring up this broader point, which I think is important for the discussion, is the Western arms deliveries. And President Zelensky finally seems to have broken through in terms of marshaling political will on the global stage. They had a donor conference of 40 nations. Even Germany is voted today, I think 567 votes out of 693 in the Bundestag to supply heavy weapons to Russia. We also have
to Ukraine.
Sorry. Well, actually, no, because they're paying for gas. So that was a Freudian slip, but not so much.
Yeah, the ammunition they're giving to Russia.
Yeah, exactly. And in fact, the Germans and French, it turns out over the last 7-8 years have been skirting sanctions and have supplied several $100 million worth of military equipment to Russia. So, but they're going to arm Ukraine too, as well as paying for gas, which effectively funds the war in Russia. Although on the sanction side, there's a oil embargo pending. Apparently, Germany's figured out how to get off of Russian oil, and now Russia's cutting off oil to Bulgaria and Poland, and basically playing a game of geopolitical economic chicken with the rest of Europe, because that could spur, a quicker transition off of Russian gas. So if we zoom out to the strategic picture, especially with the capability of Western arms, Dave, which you and Glenn are very familiar with, when do you expect these arms to become to start making an impact, and when do you expect them to become decisive? Because as Michael Kaufman pointed out, the Russian military specialist, probably the top one in the world, at least in the United States, Western world, he's pointed out that no matter what gains Russia makes at the end of this phase, they will be a spent force in the next few months because of the fact that they're just not mobilizing like Ukraine is, where Ukraine is mobilizing its entire society for war. They've started conscription or activization of reserves, and you could start to see this summer brigades and divisions of new formations coming up out of the Ukrainian side. So just wanted to think about that and talk about what is the impact of Western weapons and when.
Well, the first thing you hit on is the convenience of Germany finding alternate oil and gas resources, and then immediately announcing arms support to Ukraine. Just very convenient. And they're just trading time for space is all that Germany did in that, and it's a classic move. It's still, and we hit on this 2 weeks ago, talking about Western NATO type weapons, or even Soviet bloc weapons to Ukraine from surpluses in former Soviet countries. Yeah, especially the more Western NATO type weapon systems. It still takes time. Glenn and I were talking offline about the M777, 155 millimeter towed howitzer, which is a large number of the cannon artillery heading to Ukraine. That is not a simple weapon system. The U.S. Army has a hard time maintaining and employing the M777. It's a complicated howitzer, and introducing that into Ukraine is going to take training. It's going to require a logistics trail that doesn't currently exist to maintain the fleet of 777s being provided. Before they can, once they hit the ground in Ukraine, it's going to take a good 2 to 3 weeks of pure training, 10-hour per day training on that system, employing that system in a training environment before I would really be comfortable employing that weapon system forward, right? So your earliest 3 weeks after new weapon systems that they would be unfamiliar with hitting the ground before they're employed, up to 5 or 6 weeks.
Okay, so the next 4 to 6 weeks, you'll start to see, and to be clear, that's 100 howitzers. That is quite a bit of artillery with good range, improved range.
It's a great system when it works.
I'd be very surprised if we see it even in that time frame. Although they might do it just out of desperation. You've got several things about this. Is that I'm not sure, and Yuri may have a better handle on this, and if he hasn't, I need him to go and ask questions of who are the people who are going to be doing this, because the manpower for the artillery is actually on the front line working. So if you want people to go back, are you going to take back people from the front line who are the experts, or are you going to try and take new boys? Because if you put newbies on a gun like this, you're in a surefire thing of broken legs, broken arms, hands cut off, fingers cut off, and things like this. Because these are serious pieces of equipment, the guns. It's the same with most of the weapons, but in the hands of an experienced artillery sergeant, then they'll find it a joy and they'll learn quickly. So it's having the right people. And there's a lot of equipment coming. I mean, there is a lot of equipment coming. I mean, it's something like 18 gun batteries worth of equipment by the time you look at AS-90 and other guns. That's a lot of people. And then, you know, how are they going to blend that into the system that they have at the moment? And that, for me, is totally unclear. I can't see that because, obviously, you know, the plan is secret. But it's really complex. Now, some vehicles, some equipments like Bushmaster, I've heard that they're already on the front line. I mean, I have no evidence of this, but they could be, because they came a couple of days ago, and it's possible to drive Bushmasters all the way to the front line. It's not a difficult equipment to learn. You know, and someone who's been working on an armored vehicle will get in one and will if he's IT literate, they're instinctive. So they'll know what the switches are for, and they'll work out what the other switches are for pretty quickly.
Except for the driver's seat's on the wrong side of the road. But anyway,
the driver's seat is on the wrong side of the road. But remembering that every one of those brigades has got guys who've worked in Britain. Yeah. So for them, it won't be on the wrong side of the road. They'll be quite happy with it. Yeah, but it is a point. It is a point, and it does
international legions.
And Sam, I mean, why it's a serious point? Why it's a serious point is that because it's an operational danger. Because when you're under stress, then you don't move. You move automatically. So if someone in the Bushmaster suddenly gets shot at, okay, he's going to move his left hand to move the gear and to do things. He's not going to be using the same hand movements that he is normally used to. And therefore, there's a risk there for people who suddenly come under fire and when they're in a new vehicle and it is on the wrong side of the road, that they don't actually handle it in an instinctive way. It's going to take them weeks to become instinct. So you've got that. Then you made this point about, you know, new brigades and new divisions. Well, again, who are the people who are going to do that? How do you create a new brigade and a new division? I mean, I have actually written about this. Go on. Sorry, you're frozen. I mean, the only spare people are the Territorial Army, because most of the reserves, the sort of the third and fourth wave of reserves, a lot of those have already joined the Territorial Army. So, you know, they're going to have to pull people.
Let me describe the situation. So we have about 200,010 regular army troops. But by the way, for last 8 years, we have 500,000 veterans who came through war. So they were also artillery battalions. They went through tank battalions. So, for example, one of my employee, he came back to frontline as in regular brigade, and he was driver in tank driver. So,
you mean now?
Now, yes.
Yeah, but that means he's already been used, mate. He's not free. Everybody talks about this 500,000 and 200,000. You've already lost a lot. And already a lot of those people that have been in the ATO have already gone forward to the ATO, 1,000 plus, 100,000 plus, because the army was so thin on the ground at the start of the war. So, you know, the numbers don't always add up. The numbers that are written down don't always add up. Okay, there are probably lots in Lviv. Lviv has got 100,000+ more territorials, but someone has got to turn those into brigades and divisions. It doesn't happen on its own. You've got to have officers, you've got to have sergeant majors, you've got to have vehicles, not just the vehicles that they're being given by, you know, an artillery battery has got an artillery battery with 6 guns should be about 30 vehicles. Okay, so you've got to have all the support vehicles, the Land Rovers, the observer vehicles, the logistic vehicles, and everything else. So this whole thing, this whole management thing, just for people and vehicles and equipment to make new stuff is an extremely complex task, and it's not going to happen in 5 minutes.
No, it's not.
It just isn't. I mean, in the First World War, when they made new infantry battalions, they were not putting them into war for over a year. Over a year, and many battalions were deemed not ready for war even after a year with new people. So, you know, this is, Ukrainians are wonderful, I know this, but, you know, even if you pull that year down to 2 months or 3 months, it's still a challenging activity, management activity to make all these things. Is all I would say.
No, you're right. And Glenn, I know you know this from advising at the MOD level, the challenges they'll have with that. Yuri, you were talking about some of the people have been called up. Are any of them going to fresh units, or this is probably classified information if they are?
Secret.
So, yeah, we can only speculate here.
I will not tell you where they went by, but from my company, these guys are experienced and they have war experience. They know their units, they know their commanders, and from information I know that every day we are training, and also the best people are sent to train with the new weapon. The best experienced people. So it's not new people. This is experienced people that are retraining for new weapon, and we send the best people for training. Not the worst, not the youngest, not freshmen.
That's good, because that's what needs to happen, and it's the big challenge. Then is when you send the best people away, then you weaken the front line a bit, because that's an inevitability. So this is going to be a challenging, like 3, 4, 5 weeks until the stuff starts to come online.
Yes, as you told, now it's more or less a stabilized front line, and it's not a big intensity of fighting. So what we have at the eastern front line for Luhansk and Donetsk Oblast, we have a 3 line of defense which were built 2015, 2016, 17, 3 lines of defense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but the big fighting is happening to the south and to the north of that line of defense, in Izium, and that's the area where there has been grinding progress.
And there's no defense lines there. There are no defense lines around Izium. So those are just villages along that in that area, and unfortunately, a lot of those villages are wooden. So they're not not necessarily much good for defending against artillery or something like that. But
You run into the problem Japan had in World War II when the country was made out of wood and it burned. And ultimately, my biggest concern with everything coming in, everything that's pledged, promised, shipped, en route, and arrived is it's not the same. So managing logistics for Ukraine with a world's worth of military equipment of different calibers, of different ammunition types, different kind of powder bags are required. You know, I can have an artillery brigade with 3 different equipment sets. I have American, I have British, I have Brazilian, which came from Germany, but it's 2 generations old German equipment, right? And I need the supply. I need to sustain that unit in combat. And I need to have the apparatus. I need the people trained and knowing what is where I'm getting it from, and I have to get it along that line of communication, that route, that main supply route, alternate supply route, you know, to the unit that needs it when they need it. And that's going to be the complicated task.
It is, because it's because we work on a different concept, and you know, we work on a different logistic concept. We don't have little bases, little ammunition dumps scattered all over the countryside, and our maintenance is different levels of maintenance to keep equipment going. I mean, we're just gonna. Ukraine is just going to have to adapt to this, and it will take time. It will take time. It will take time for the brighter boys to learn how to repair a gun, a new gun, or a new vehicle, but they will. But unfortunately, time is the essence in this case.
It's the enemy.
It's the enemy, and it's the big enemy. The other thing is the worry about you know, if the logistics system is not smooth, which it isn't, is making sure that you get the right new ammunition to the right place and the right new spares to the right place, and that is going to take a different style of logistics to what is there at the moment. There's going to need to be some more logistic commanders, because this is not something you can just throw at the volunteers and say, go and get me go and get me an actuator for the gun, or a new one of these, or something like that. Even some of the wheel sizes are going to be different, and you can't drive down the road to the local garage and just grab it at the moment. So this is going to be a challenge. It's going to be a real challenge, and I hope that someone is actually thinking about the logistic challenge with the same energy as they have of the tactical challenge of just making a crew for a gun, because it's much more complex than as we say, much more complex than just giving javelin or just giving an anti-tank weapon. We just give it to someone and they use it. Now you're looking at crew weapons that are new and complex.
And come with a lot of requirements.
Yeah. But I mean, all these things are doable, but it's just I just hope that the people that are taking them on understand that you can't use them in the same way. Can't use the things in the same way.
Yeah.
I'm sure they'll adapt. And they'll make their own concept of how to use vehicles and how to use them best.
Yeah, and the other thing we might have here that, and I don't know, because I don't know the numbers and the ratios and crews. You may find there's some catastrophic success of foreign military aid coming into Ukraine, where a gun crew might actually have too many guns. Right, you can only man one gun at a time. So what's the ratio of inbound equipment? And you kind of hit on this too, Glenn, when you're talking the total number of personnel available in current units and who can fill new units, and there's a potential there could be too much equipment coming in, that creates other problems.
For the number of trained people, you might well be right. And then there's the task of what you do with the old equipment, and do you backload it for people that know how to use that equipment more quickly, like reserves, or people in the territorial army who've been in the ATO, or do you leave that also with the frontline units?
Right, which creates more logistics problems.
Which creates more logistic problems, yeah.
Right.
Well, let's zoom out a little bit to the other side, because I wanted to. We're going through a lot of the challenges Ukrainian army is going to face with quality problems, let's say, compared to a month ago, with a lot of new equipment, the logistical challenges of training people, and more importantly, supporting different types of equipment. But I would say that Ukraine right now is moving into the realm where they're getting NATO standard equipment, which means that they'll go from 152 millimeter rounds, which is harder for them to acquire than 155 millimeter rounds, which is much easier for us to supply. And there is some interoperability, at least in terms of ammunition, which is really critical for the new equipment they'll be getting. And it also puts them on the path to be a much more modern military long term, because Ukraine, I think we'd all agree, will survive as a state. The question is, with what territory, and what's the big picture there? But let's go over to the Russian side, because you brought this point up, Glenn, that General Gerasimov himself, the commander-in-chief of the Russian army, is rumored to be in Izium, which is putting himself right in range of becoming one of the next dead generals on the Russian side. And why would he be there? Well, probably because his job, or maybe even life, depends on it. There must be quite a bit of desperation on the Russian side, because they do not have mobilization yet. They have not mobilized. They've not even fully manned their own crews, according to Michael Kaufman, who was talking, Russian military is running around with, armored fighting vehicles that have maybe two infantrymen in the back, maybe instead of 6 or 8, which you'd normally expect. They are not fully manned, not even close. weren't when the war started, and the casualties haven't helped that. The force ratios you need in an offensive, which they didn't pay attention to when they invaded Ukraine, are certainly still not where you'd want them to be, at 2 to 3 to 1. So the most optimistic prognosis, according to Igor Girkin on the Russian side, who's a huge critic of his own government, is that the Donbass offensive may get some tactical success, which you're seeing right now, but not a strategic or even operational success, which would be surrounding some or large parts or all of the Ukrainian army and destroying it. So when this phase ends and war goes in waves, and right now we're starting to crest the wave of the Battle of the Donbass, Ukraine will be mobilizing, integrating a bunch of new equipment, going through a lot of growing pains, but continuing to gather strength in both manpower and equipment, compared to the Russian military, which will be a spent force. No matter how they perform, they will expend the fuel, ammunition, lives, equipment at some point in the next few months. The fighting's just too intense with the Ukrainians. Where does that leave us, Glenn, in your perspective, when that phase ends? And Putin has shown no interest in peace talks, as of the Ukrainians recently, because of things that have happened. It looks like there could be a momentum shift to the Ukrainian side in the next few months if they hold in the Battle of the Donbass and don't allow for a a major encirclement of their troops.
It's interesting. I mean, what worries me most is the South. Is the South and the damage, the terrorist type damage that is being done to the south of the country. And in many ways, I think this is more insidious and a bigger threat to the health of Ukraine than what is happening in the northeast and the straightforward battles in the northeast. I mean, that's just army versus army slogging it out. But what's happening down the south with terror, with you know, making children learn Russian in schools, just trying to Russianize the whole of the south area. That's a much more nasty problem for Ukraine in the main. I think you're right about the Russians will probably run out of energy in the top. I mean, even if they get into Kharkiv and they take Kharkiv, okay, so they flatten it, they start killing people. It doesn't change the body of Ukraine. If they break through around Izium, wow, it then becomes their problem. At the moment, it's Ukraine's problem in defending. But if Russia breaks through, it becomes their problem because then they've got to do something with it. And even with Gerasimov, as you said, you know, vehicles with only 2 men in, vehicles that have got young officers in who are not even commanding anything because they're cadets and they were pulled forward to the front line. These boys they're not any longer a credible attack force that can actually start going across the country and doing something. And the population that they're going to get there isn't so much population because lots have already left. So they're not going to be able to use the terror game as much as they've done before. Then they've got to hold the area behind, remembering that Kharkiv has got a large territorial defense force, and it is large, and those boys are going to not give in a hurry. So Russia in the northeast, I would say, has actually bitten off more than it can chew. And as new weapons and things come in, they're going to find, and artillery starts attacking back at their artillery, they're going to find it quite difficult. So, but the south, if they start losing in the north, then what Putin's game can be in the south is to go for a ceasefire. And then the danger is that either the West forces, some people in the West, some countries in the West will want a ceasefire, and maybe even Zelensky wants a ceasefire or feels he needs a ceasefire. I'm hoping that they just tell Russia to go away, because at some stage, Putin may realize that he's losing badly, but he's still got a huge amount of ground down the south. That, you know, all the way Mariupol, all the way across Berdyansk, all the way across to Nikolaev. That's a large swathe of ground, and he could actually sue for peace on that, and then sort himself out over the next 5 years. You know, get a new defense minister, new Gerasimov, and actually start trying to get himself ready for another war. So the south worries me more than the northeast. The northeast is just fighting, and the Ukrainians will sort themselves out there, no question. Does that make sense to you?
Well, what really needs to happen, and this is, I guess you put your finger on it, Glenn, is Ukraine has to figure out how to equip for and organize for and run what the Russians couldn't do well, which is combined arms maneuver warfare in the south. Because if that doesn't happen, then you're right. The advantage, as we see in this war, is always with the defender. Although I think Russians defending don't have nearly as much of a advantage in Ukrainian soil as obviously Ukrainians defending on Ukrainian soil because of intelligence and
yeah,
you know, population being supportive. But that's really the big question coming up is can Ukraine turn itself into an offensive combined arms, heavy maneuver warfare army? Because they have to. And
because they can't, because the current method of fighting is not getting the gains, is not getting positive gains. It's a slow negative war for them. Now, even with the new equipment, they've got to attack something, because effectively Ukraine has lost the initiative. And when you lose the initiative, the game is always to the advantage of the other side. So Russia is doing what Russia wants to do at the moment. Ukraine isn't. Ukraine is having to match what Russia does. And they've got to turn that round. At some stage, they've got to become the people that are forcing Russia to take the initiative. Now, that may take 6-7 months. I mean, remember, Second World War, we waited 3 years. 3 years, mate. Long time before we actually, did that big attack. And it may well be that Ukraine's got to wait a year or 2 years to sort itself out and redesign what it's doing before it can actually go. And then we're in the business. Russia has got the artillery ammunition. It may not have all the human beings that it needs at the moment, but it has got the artillery ammunition. Ukraine has got the problem that it's got to keep persuading the West to give it artillery ammunition. And at the moment, I don't think there's enough around everywhere for a war that keeps going for another year. So we're going to have to, they're going to have to start making new ammunition, because you can't ask America to give up all its stocks. I mean, actually, it needs to keep, a sensible amount. Most countries do. They can't give it all up.
Well, if they don't spend it here, they'll end up spending it in a larger war. And I think
they'll end up spending it in a larger war. There's no question about that, which will be 10 times more expensive than what they're coughing up. I mean, as I said, as I tweeted a couple of weeks ago, Zelensky asked for 1%. He should have asked for 10%, because 10% would still be much cheaper than going to actually to have to fight a Russia that wins in Ukraine, because the amount of money we'd have to spend on rearming everybody would be monstrous. Rearming, all of NATO.
You're on the ground. The soldiers who are going into these units who have to form the backbone of this new offensive formations that need to be built. What are your thoughts on the timeline? I have a sense that when it is actually really good time for maneuver warfare, I have a sneaking suspicion, Dave, that Ukraine might be able to launch some armored attacks that could be quite effective. But I want to hear your thoughts, and then Dave.
So first of all, psychologically, all units are preparing for offense. So everyone understands that we are just gathering ammunition and waiting for new next generation weapon. So we don't want to lose our best people in symmetrical, conventional warfare. We want to fight at another level, so we can have at least 1 to 10 proportion of deaths in favor of Ukrainians. And also, what I see, that I communicate with people on occupied territories, that Russians feel that territories are toxic, and they are losing their confidence in the reason why they are there, and a lot of them are psychologically exhausted, feel like emptiness, because they feel hatred of locals, and they can solve this by additional aggression, but at the same time it makes like opposite effect. And I think that this is one of factors that is working for Ukraine, because they don't want to stay there as bastards. What is expected just on like from our side of view, that we don't want to fight in front, in head-to-head clashes, and from, for example, from what I hear from our snipers, that they are just tied to kill Russians, because they are like in in forcing Dnieper River, when Stalin told that you have to capture the Kyiv before the anniversary of Great October Revolution, and Ukraine and the Soviet army lost about 300,000 soldiers for 7 days. So what I hear from frontline, that they are just pushing troops to the front line, and snipers are just tired to pull the trigger.
Yeah, that's what's happening around Izium, or just across the front line?
Around different points, but mostly from DNR LNR region.
Yeah, that's right. Around the trench lines. The trouble with Izium is that they're really that area that is heavy use of artillery, which means that and the guys are not necessarily in trench lines. Well, mostly they're not. So that means that they take casualties, and I mean, we all know that the stress of being under artillery is monstrous when it's landing around you and actually killing people to the left and right of you, or damaging people. So it's very hard then when the troops come, when the Russian troops come, even if they are completely useless soldiers, which in many cases they are. It's still very hard to dig yourself out from being underneath the artillery attack and actually try to get back to being good soldiers again. And I'm hearing this from quite a few in the front line, that they're just saying that they're exhausted from the rocket launcher attacks, and that understandably so. But they're holding, and that's the remarkable thing, and that's the truly remarkable thing about the Ukrainian Defense Forces, is that they're being bombarded, but they're still holding. Fingers crossed that it stays that way.
Well, yeah. David, any last thoughts here about summer being the best time for maneuver, aside from the dead of winter? And looks like Ukraine now has more tanks than the Russians have in theater, operable. That's the latest U.S. intelligence estimate. And these are T-72s mainly, which are known to Ukrainian forces.
Yep.
I am looking forward to seeing which tank becomes the main battle tank of the Ukrainian army next generation. But what are your thoughts on the potential for maneuver warfare this summer, and the counteroffensive that the Russians actually fear is coming? I think that's one of the reasons why Gerasimov is at the front. Is one, you've got May 9th coming up, which although it seems strange to us that day would precipitate such, let's call it, furious and ill-advised offensive efforts. Yuri just gave us a historical lesson on why that probably is driving a lot of this. What are your thoughts on the pending Ukrainian counteroffensive, which I think is building?
Yeah, and that's important. Remember, history is very significant to Putin. So those dates, whether it's May, whether it's the October Revolution, they have significant personal meaning. And the stack more meaning on top of them really strengthens the importance of the day for Mother Russia. I've advocated for this for a while now. Is Ukraine really needs to transition now from a static defense to a mobile defense. All right, and what the mobile defense does is it really allows you to buy time and capability, because a mobile defense has offensive characteristics in it. Right, so what this will do is allow Ukraine to significantly attrit Russian capability.
Yeah,
because this is a mobile defense is a series of well-planned counterattacks. All right. And what you can do here, and Yuri hit on this, and I completely believe this, you don't want to go head to head. You don't want to go tank for tank. I want to go 3 tanks against 1 tank. Right. So we don't want to fight entire Russian units. We want to attack them in piecemeal. We want to isolate elements of Russian forces along the front, and in a very small geographic location, overwhelm them with combat power in a counterattack, destroy them, and withdraw back to a line of defense, and continue to hit them piece by piece along very small fronts. And then this will achieve some really good effect along that front, right? And that builds an offensive mindset across an army that, as we progress with foreign military investment in Ukraine over the next several months, can build up into that larger transition to a pure offense. So it builds it up over time. It degrades Russian capability now, and really allows that transition over the next several months. I think the other thing Ukraine's really going to do is, we may have seen some instance of this, is a deep strike, deep attack capability, and we need to get in and disrupt Russia's ability to sustain combat.
Yeah, it's more than that, David. We want to make them turn around and run. And
right.
Personally, I think that the area that is most vulnerable is the south, much more than the east. And I if I was going to counterattack, I would head for as hard as I could south for the bridge at Crimea, because I think if you get the bridge at Crimea, as you go down towards it, I think people will get out of the way, to be honest. If you've got anything that's solid heading south, because they're vulnerable. The Russians are definitely vulnerable, and if they think that their route home is going to be cut off, I'm sure that a lot of them will just turn around and drive.
Yeah, and Crimea is full of administrators and.
Yeah, Crimea itself is full of. Crimea is wide open.
Yeah.
I mean, there's as you're right, it's administrators and sailors that have been left, but that are deeply unhappy, and air defense gunners.
Yeah,
it's not an armored. It's not a defense for armored warfare at all. They get in there. I am sure that most of the people in Ukraine, in Crimea, will be heading for that bridge as fast as they can go. I do not see.
And also when talking about deep strike, I'm not only talking about bombing, rocket, missile kind of attacks. I'm also talking about unconventional warfare.
Yeah,
which can really play in deep.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing is that the thing that will frighten them most is face-to-face combat. That obviously they don't like that. When you hit people with rockets and things like that, there's nothing personal about it. This needs to have that personal feel to it. That we're coming, and we're coming to get you. That has got to be the Ukrainian motto. There's got to be, we're coming to get you, and they've got to feel it somewhere, and somewhere soon, I hope. But it may be another 6, 7, 8 weeks before we see this, and until then, the boys have just got to hold on, and not allow Russia to take much more land, or Odessa.
Yeah, and utilizing, in hit with Odessa, Transnistria is significant to that. That would be one deep strike. If I'm Ukraine, I want an unconventional warfare capability in Transnistria. I want to form that resistance movement, develop it into insurgency, have coercive and disruptive population.
Dave, I don't think there's anybody there to do it. I think anybody who is going to do that is already driven either into Ukraine or into Moldova.
Yeah, they need to get back in. Right? that's where you need to go.
Have you seen the long queue? The pictures of the queues. There's a long queues of vehicles driving into Moldova to get out of Transnistria.
Yeah.
Yes, from what I hear, that Transnistria doesn't want to fight at all, so they're escaping. So, and then I sent documents to our chat group about official order of Transnistria so-called government about gathering all civilians around training camps, but they are running out of Transnistria to Moldova or to Ukraine out there, and no one wants to take machine gun. And also I sent a document about Izium issued by local administration, Russian so-called administration, about civilian cooperation and assuring Ukrainians that electricity will be renewed, water supply will be renewed, hospital care, medical care will be renewed. And I feel the smell of Gerasimov General, because he is a well-known author of hybrid warfare as a doctrine, Gerasimov doctrine, as far as you know. And I think that this is, we will hear the attempts to build some way of asymmetrical hybrid collaborative warfare strategies that could be implied at the region, and maybe also at the southern region to break the conventional rules of warfare, because as far as we know, about 1 million of Ukrainians were deported to Russia, including children, including men also, and they now trying to recruit Ukrainians from occupied territories to push them to be recruited in Russian army. And I think that this is the smell of Gerasimov.
I think you're right. I'm sure, and I mean, one worrying thing is the thought of them actually mobilizing people down in the southern area to fight on behalf of Russia, because I mean there'll be no training or anything. They'll just literally put someone in uniform, shove them in a vehicle, and send them to fight Ukrainians, which was pretty much what happened in the Baltic states during during the battles between Russia and Germany. So, which is what the Russians did. Just shove people in vehicles and send them off to fight the Germans. They're used to it. They've done it before. This is not a new thing. We should not be surprised with the evil and the brutality of Russia, because all their methods are tried and tested methods that they've used, historically.
Reverting back to form.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, everything's gonna reveal itself in the next few months. Especially, we'll see the Battle of the Donbass, I think, start to crest the wave. I think the intensity's picked up with General Gerasimov on the ground, allegedly. We'll certainly, between now and May 9th, I think, see it's going to be very interesting what happens on that day, whether Russia uses it to announce some kind of victory, some kind of independence or annexation of existing territories, or if President Putin, and some people suspect, will try to use the patriotic fervor of that day to mobilize Russia for war. And I think that's a big thing to watch going forward. Is Putin's been resisting general mobilization, whereas Ukraine has mobilized since February 24th. Ukraine's on their home territory. They're getting supplied by the entire West. The old arsenal of democracy, Lend-Lease Act, even same brand coming back. And that is going to be a very interesting thing to see if Russia tries to catch up in the mobilization or still tries to pretend that this is not a general war, because that has huge implications for Russian society. But it also will mean a long and protracted war.
Yeah.
As Yuri warned on the first time we ever did this broadcast on 25th of February, this is going to be a long war. Unfortunately, I think we're seeing that all too clearly in front of us, that this won't be over soon. And it's going to take a while for Ukraine to recapture its own territory in the event that Russia doesn't mobilize. And if they do, then this is going to be a very long war.
Also, I want to add some elements of our discussion is about, sorry, Glenn, I interrupted you.
No, go.
About guerrilla warfare. So also, as you see that we have more and more incidents about interrupting Russian logistics, including operations with the attacks of Russian territories. Also, we are training very fast. Ukrainians get used to study, to learn a lot of things, and our problems with different weapons is good problems. Yes.
Yeah.
It's a positive problems, and also we know how to kill generals. So I think that close. Yes, we feel the smell of Gerasimov, and even if he is alive, so it could be changed. The smell could be changed.
Yes. Well, Yuri, thanks for joining us again. As always, it's great to have you with us, and I'll leave you with the last point there. Glenn, Dave, thank you also. Dave, it was great to see you on our trip through the heartland of America, and now I'm in your favorite baseball team city, I guess. And Glenn, Yuri, I'll be going back to your part of the world in early June. I'll be heading back over. Hopefully, see you in Kyiv then, Yuri. And we look forward to continuing this discussion as long as it takes. So thank you all for joining us again. And Thank you everyone for tuning in. Please share this. Please also watch for the app we're about to release. I know I've been talking about it for a while, but we're literally waiting on a final integration with PayPal to be approved, and we'll be releasing the app where people who want to donate directly to Ukrainians can do that. And we look forward to featuring that when it's ready. So thanks a lot, everyone, and we'll see you next time.